Nothing gets stuck in development hell like a sequel. Duke Nukem Forever was coming for almost a decade. Beyond Good and Evil 2 has been in development since the first game came out on the PlayStation 2 and has undergone changes to plot, setting, and genre. But there are plenty of sequels on the horizon as well. That said, what about those games that aren't on everyone's lips? The titles that may have been announced and forgotten about, or haven't been officially announced at all. These are sequels you might not know are on the horizon. Some even sit on the distant horizon of 2024 and beyond, but they'll be here before you know it. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video game sequels you didn't know were coming. Number 10, Greedfall 2: The Dying World. You might not have heard about a sequel to the 2019 open-world adventure RPG because it wasn't assured of getting a sequel at all. The original didn't exactly fly off the shelves like startled crows, and reviews were somewhat mixed. But in May, the publisher Nakon Gaming announced that Greedfall had managed to sell over 2 million copies, and they had greenlit a sequel from original developer Spiders, titled Greedfall 2: The Dying World. Nakon has stated that the sequel will be continuing the winning formula of the first game, though they promised more tactical combat. Instead of playing as one of the medieval colonizers in the form of Ambassador de Sade, this sequel will take place 3 years before the first game. In this prequel, you'll play as a native of Tir Freddy, the land where most of the original game takes place. By the sounds of it, you'll basically play an enslaved native who has to win your freedom, fight the colonizing big bad, and somehow get back to your homeland. Given the first game's interesting characters, it'd certainly be a great adventure. We just hope those wonderful characters will be given a few more combat barks. One can only hear, "Move away, things are about to get dicey," so many times and still remain sane. Number 9, Jagged Alliance 3. While the last game in the Jagged Alliance franchise may have been 2018's Jagged Alliance Rage, the last good one was from way back before the year started with a 2. Jagged Alliance 2 was the last game in the franchise to get a 6 or higher on Metacritic, and the 8.9 it earned is a lot better than Rage's 3.0. The franchise has changed hands a blistering number of times since its high point under the now-defunct Surtech and Talonsoft companies in the 90s. Now THQ Nordic, who's owned the publishing rights since 2014, has seen fit to hand the reins off to Haemimont Games of Victor Vran, Tropico, and Surviving Mars fame. Haemimont looks to have gone back to the franchise's roots and improved it out from there. Adding a co-op multiplayer mode, there's also always the hope they include the created character feature long absent from the franchise. Jagged Alliance 3 was first announced in 2004 but never actually got made, making this the first mainline game in the series since 1999. With THQ Nordic stating that JA3 will cater to the hardcore fans of the series, here's hoping Haemimont gives the franchise the revival it deserves. It's been too long since we heard someone call us Woody. Number 8, Lords of the Fallen 2: The Lords of the Fallen. You may not remember Lords of the Fallen because it was an action RPG originally released in 2014. Published by Polish studio CI Games, it was developed by Deck 13, who would later make a spiritual successor in 2017's The Surge. A versatile action game with difficult, highly technical combat and an interesting risk versus reward character progression system. In Soulsborne fashion, each hub world is scattered with checkpoints where the player can save, replenish consumable items, and spend experience to upgrade the player character Harkit. But if you use the checkpoint, it resets an experience multiplier. So skipping checkpoints grants you more experience. Of course, if you die, all the non-boss enemies reset and you have a set time to get back to where you died, or else any unspent experience is lost. You know what else is lost? This game, in development hell. CI Games announced the sequel in late 2014, but ultimately dumped the original developer Deck 13. In 2018, they partnered with Defiant Studios, only to also dump them in 2020. Finally, just opening their own subsidiary developer Hexworks, the game looks to finally be getting done with a scheduled 2023 release, almost a decade after the first. Number 7, Earthworm Jim 4. If you're old enough to remember gaming in the 90s, you probably remember Earthworm Jim, and if you're old enough to remember gaming in the 80s, you probably still don't remember the Intellivision. Selling 3 million units between 1980 and 1983, it certainly wasn't a business failure, but it barely survived the video game crash in the 80s. Eventually, the final nails in Intellico's coffin were Nintendo's NES and the Atari 7800, and they were bankrupt by 1990. But that all changed in 2017 when Intellivision Productions founder and license holder Keith Robinson died. A controlling stake in the company was purchased by Tommy Tallarico, famed video game composer and sound designer, and one of the driving forces behind the orchestral phenomenon Video Games Live. Tallarico announced that Intellivision would be getting back into the video game console market, releasing the Amico in 2020. Given that it's currently 2022, the Amico has been delayed 3 times, and Tallarico stepped down as Intellivision's CEO, so I suppose you could say it's not looking good. Tallarico was one of the minds behind the original Earthworm Jim series, and he pushed to get a new entry in the franchise to be an exclusive for the Amico. Last it was seen, Jim was able to move across the screen and potential fans were unimpressed. So maybe it's not so bad if we're wrong and this one doesn't actually come out. Number 6, Disaster Report 5. Did you know there have been 4 games in the Disaster Report series? No? Well, that's because there almost wasn't. Originally released as Zetai Zetsume Toshi, The Desperate City in 2002, with further releases in 2006 and 2009. The 4th game in the series was scheduled to release on PlayStation 3 in 2011. However, after the Tohoku earthquake and ensuing tsunami, developers IREM decided it would be in poor taste to continue the game. That is until 2014 when the IP was purchased by Granzella, a developer newly founded by one of the producers of the original series. Granzella wound up releasing the 4th game in the series to incredibly middling/terrible reviews on the PlayStation 4 in 2018. By the end of 2020, Granzella published a teaser showcasing that they were working on the 5th game in the series. News was fairly slim until May of this year when Granzella announced some details about the game. Like the first entry, DR5 is a prequel, taking place between the 1st and 2nd game, so it's both a sequel and a prequel. It's planned as an open world title and will have several recurring characters from other games, including the protagonist of the 1st game, though he's not slated to be the star. He is hoping when it finally comes out, likely in 2024, that it will get a better rating than the 2 out of 5 stars the last one did. Number 5, Ravenlock. Coco Cucumber is an adorably named indie developer from Ontario, known for equally adorable games Planet of Eyes, River Bond, and Echo Generation. Coming in 2023 is their latest game, Ravenlock. Even if you've come across it in a report on upcoming indie games or something, you might not even realize that it's a sequel to their earlier work. Ravenlock is to be the final entry to their Voxel trilogy, named so for Coco Cucumber's 3D pixel art graphics. Now, trilogy is admittedly used a little bit loosely here. Riverbond, Echo Generation, and Ravenlock are united by graphical theme, but not narrative or even genre. Riverbond was a hack-and-slash dungeon crawler from 2017. Echo Generation was a turn-based adventure RPG. And finally, Ravenlock is to be a fairy tale action-adventure, taking liberally from the Alice in Wonderland stories. Ravenlock, the titular child heroine, is transported to a fantastical world, ruled by the tyrannical Caterpillar Queen, and must fight to save the fallen kingdom, presumably to get back home. So if Alice in Wonderland meets Coraline was ever a thought you had, then you probably have troubled thoughts, and you should absolutely pick this one up when it comes out next year. Number 4, Endless Dungeon. The Endless franchise has been all over the place in terms of genre and theme, but not in quality. Starting with 2012's 4X turn-based space fantasy Endless Space, they went on to create Endless Legend, a medieval fantasy 4X game, and most recently Humankind, the 4X turn-based historical civilization building strategy game. Nominated for Best Sim/Strategy Game at the Game Awards in 2021, Humankind was Amplitude Studios' self-proclaimed magnum opus. But don't think Amplitude is a one-trick pony with different costumes, because in 2014, they also released Dungeon of the Endless, a roguelike tower defense game that managed to get its own nomination for Best Strategy or Sim Game of the Year, as well as Outstanding Achievement in Game Design at the 18th Annual DICE Awards. Since Dungeon of the Endless was released, Amplitude has put out a sequel to Endless Space and their aforementioned magnum opus Humankind. But in 2020, they announced a sequel, Endless Dungeon. This time the game will be a roguelite tower defense twin-stick shooter. Endless Dungeon is set to release on basically everything in 2023, featuring solo play or up to 3 players in co-op. Number 3, Mad Max 2. This one has just a touch of hope and a dash of wishful thinking involved. In February 2022, tech consultant Wendy W. Fock shared a photograph of her undergoing a process known as photogrammetry. Her face and/or body is 3D scanned utilizing dozens of cameras at different angles all around her. She claimed in the tweet that she was just being scanned for an upcoming game by Avalanche Studios, the developers behind Just Cause, Generation Zero, and you guessed it, the open-world Mad Max game. Ms. Fox stated in her February tweet that she was being scanned at Avalanche's New York studio by a person named O'Neill before the COVID-19 pandemic occurred, which she refers to as the before times. The scanning, she claims, was to use her likeness as a rebel in a previously unannounced Mad Max 2. Yes, a much-wanted sequel to the cult hit from 2015. The plot thickens a bit here though, because Fox first tweeted about the situation in Feb of 2017 from the Twitter account for WE Designs, the tech consultant firm she helped found and acts as creative director. There, she didn't list what game she was being scanned for. In 2017, Avalanche was likely working on Rage 2, Generation Zero, and Just Cause 4. So while it's a bit hard to determine if they're actively working on a Mad Max sequel, if they were at the photogrammetry stage in 2017 and are still developing it, a 2023 or 2024 release is possible. Number 2. Rivals of Aether 2. Rivals of Aether was something of a poor man's Super Smash Bros. With a focus on faster, more offensive, and technical combat. Coming out in 2017, it was based on a foundation set up by a fan remake of the original SSB that eventually evolved into its own game. ROA took off and was well received, earning a 90 out of 100 from Destructoid, and was called the indie answer to Super Smash Bros. By 2021, the game had already become a franchise with both a deck-building game, Creatures of Aether, and a dating sim, Lovers of Aether, spun off from the original. A turn-based roguelike spin-off called Dungeons of Aether was originally slated for a 2022 release, but it looks like it'll be first quarter 2023, at least on Steam. If all these spin-offs and the comic series Tales of Aether don't interest you and you just want more of the original, then we've got good news for you. Rivals of Aether 2 is currently in development and slated for a 2024 release. And if you don't care about another mainline entry and just want more of those wild spin-offs, well, the developers have also formally founded Aether Studios to help coordinate the development of new releases better. Number 1. Coconia When They Cry, Phase 2. We end this list with a 2-for-1 special, the sequel of a sequel. Coconia When They Cry is the Neon Genesis Evangelion-inspired 5th entry in the When They Cry series of murder mystery visual novels, coming after the famed Higurashi and Umineko games. Coconia's first release of 4 planned episodes, Phase 1 for You, the replaceable ones, was initially released in 2019, with Episode 2 planned to come out the following year. And then, that whole pandemic thing happened, decimating the efficiency of video game development worldwide. Phase 2 had an additional issue to it, however, that has delayed its release. The catastrophic event planned for the game's second episode was a worldwide pandemic. The developer, known by his pseudonym Ryukishi07, described it as if Godzilla attacked during the titular 1945 kaiju film production. One hopes that Ryukishi07's development with Konami as the writer for the recently announced Silent Hill F won't interrupt continuation of Phase 2, since he's had to send it back to the drawing board. If it does, we'll finally know why they cry. Or at least, why we cry. That's the end of our list, but do let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other video game sequels most people don't know are coming. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.